Gary Numan's Cars, from the album The Pleasure Principle, the cover of which features a pyramid, is puzzling for some people who may wonder why there are no cars in the video. The answer is the song is not about a literal car with four wheels and a motor, it's about a vessel for an entity. Think maritime law and how maritime law renders the human being a vessel, and you'll be on the right track. Earlier I read a passage from the book A History of Secret Societies pertaining to illumination, and to quote part of that passage, "The secret can only be acquired by exercising the mind and the body until the terrestrial man is so refined as to become a vehicle for the use of this power." Vehicle being the key word. Gary Numan, Numan as in new man, which is a word for the illuminated man, stand in the pyramid of illumination, symbolising his being under the control or the possession of the light, and the light represents Lucifer. The first lyrics of the song are as follows. "Here in my car, I feel safest of all. I can lock all my doors, it's the only way to live in cars." Okay, so the entity prefers it in a human body to where it would otherwise reside, that being the abyss, which falls in line with the demon legion begging Christ not to send it back into the abyss in the Bible. It's the only way to live because that is how the Antichrist consciousness is able to navigate this world, via a vessel. The song continues. "Here in my car, I can only receive. I can listen to you. It keeps me stable for days in cars." Why can it only receive? Because Antichrist consciousness is negative in nature, and negativity is a receiving pole, while positivity is a giving pole. Strictly speaking, the two are supposed to complement each other, but this is out of balance negativity, and out of balance negativity doesn't complement anything but itself. The intrinsic nature of positivity gives, it radiates outward, which is to say, it begets sovereignty. It allows for individual expression. It's like the sun shining its rays in different directions. Each ray of light that emanates from the sun shines at a different angle to the next. So you could say that each ray has its own sovereignty. And yeah, at a deeper level, it's still an aspect of the sun, but it is allowed to shine in its own right. Negativity, on the other hand, is the receiver. Now again, in its natural state, the negative or feminine aspect is like the moon, receiving the sun's light to become illuminated and shine its light on those in the darkness. However, the outer balance negative is more along the lines of a black hole. It's like a vacuum, just sucking everything into the centre. It centralises everything into oneness. So there are no rays of light coming out of it. In other words, no individual expression, which is to say, no sovereignty. Only oneness, one consciousness, with no salient features. It draws inward and inward only. So it doesn't give, it only receives, you see. It all goes back to the balance versus anti-balance concept. The 3 and the 6 are the yin and the yang, the 9 is the controlling force. The Antichrist consciousness is the 9 of its own polarity, while the Christ consciousness is the 9 of its own polarity. Positive polarity versus negative polarity. And negative polarity is how this Antichrist consciousness sustains itself and grows in this universe. It only receives. Naturally, you may wonder why a receiving force would use a giving force as its symbol. Light is, after all, a giving force. The answer is simply that it's deceptive, and it uses the same symbols because it is the inversion of those symbols and of the principles that they represent. It can't give, but it can use or take what the positive gives for its own ends. It can absorb light and shine it on someone, but that light does not belong to it. It did not generate that light in and of itself. It stole it from something that did to use it for a negative purpose. And when this Antichrist consciousness uses light, instead of helping you see, it blinds you. Instead of sovereign rays of light, you would get isolated rays of light, but have forgotten that they're a part of the sun. So the Antichrist consciousness turns sovereignty into isolation, or more accurately, ice-olation, only to then trick those isolated rays into believing that it is the sun, so it can trick them into accepting that and suck them in to absorb them into its oneness. So it's like a black hole trying to tell you that it's the sun. Now, returning to the song, we can understand why it says, "Here in my car, I can only receive. I can listen to you. It keeps me stable for days." Because the human vessel stabilises it, allowing it to navigate the world. The last verse seems to be Gary Numan's own spirit reacting to what is taking place with this Antichrist consciousness. The notion of the spirit detaching from the body after a severe trauma, which is to say dissociation, is a commonly used method in mind control, specifically MKUltra. Moreover, it is the closest that one can come to the subversion of another's free will. Free will is a quality inherent to the soul, but not to the temporal body. So, by traumatising that soul into vacating the body, which is our temple, the mind can be programmed and the temple reoccupied by a foreign presence. Now, in the first part of the last verse of Cars, Gary says, "Here in my car, where the image breaks down, will you visit me please, if I open my door in Cars?" Okay, so here in my car, where the image breaks down. This is not a reference to image in terms of what can be seen with the eyes, but more so a self-image. Remember that the Antichrist consciousness wants to make us in its image, so we're dealing with something esoteric here, and not from the realm of the mundane. In mind control, alters are created using trauma-based dissociation. The spirit separates from the vessel or the body, and the mind is fragmented. The common symbolism for this is the image of the mind control victim in a mirror, which is then smashed into tiny pieces. The smashing into pieces conveys the fragmentation of the mind into alters. The point here is not to claim that Gary Numan is a product of MKUltra, although that is possible. My point is that something is affecting Gary's sense of self-perception here, and the trauma-based fragmentation I described may be involved. If we look at the definition of the word breakdown, we have the following answers. 1a, the act or process of failing to function or continue. 1b, the condition resulting from this. 2, electricity, the abrupt failure of an insulator or insulated medium to restrict the flow of the current. 3, a typically sudden collapse in physical health. 4, an analysis of some kind. 5, disintegration or decomposition into parts or elements, in other words, fragmentation. And 6, an American country dance. Well, I think it's safe to say that we can rule out 4, 3 and 6. 1 is valid in that his self-image is no longer functioning properly. 2 is certainly apropos, taking into consideration maritime law and the flow of the current guided by the banks. Now, just as the all or the collective consciousness is a polarity and has a guiding force, so the 3 and the 6, or the yin and the yang, guided by the 9, meaning it is a trinity with the 3, 6 and 9, we as humans, all things being fractal, have our own microcosmic version of this trinity. The often referenced phrase, mind, body and spirit, is exactly that. The mind and the body are the 3 and the 6, and the 9 is the spirit. If you look at a plug, there are 3 prongs. The 3 prongs are the trinity. The 2 prongs at the top are where the power flows from hot to neutral, and the prong at the bottom is a grounding prong. The grounding prong is there to prevent you, or whatever appliance you have plugged in, from getting shocked, or in the case of the appliances, fried. If you juxtapose the three-pronged plug with mind, spirit and body, the hot and the neutral prongs are mind and body, whereas the grounding prong is the spirit. So the spirit is protecting the body from intrusion by an outside force. It's preventing the Antichrist consciousness from crossing the threshold. With electrical breakdown, instead of a grounding prong, there is an insulator. The insulator restricts the current, but if the insulator fails, the current will continue to flow, leading to a similar consequence of not having a grounding prong. So when Gary talks about the image breaking down, if the spirit is likened to an insulator, and that insulator has an electrical breakdown, being that our image, which this Antichrist consciousness seeks to change to its own, is synonymous with the spirit, it becomes clear what Gary might be referring to here. Now, number 5 brings us right back to the fragmentation of the mind breaking into alters after dissociation, and the spirit leaving the body. So I think it's safe to say that the image breaking down relates to the spirit leaving the body. The next lines in the song are, "Will you visit me please if I open my door in cars?" I think it's fair to say at this stage that Gary has invited something in. There's really nothing subtle about "will you visit me please if I open my door." You can't interpret that as anything but an invitation. So he has invited this Antichrist consciousness in. The song continues, "Here in my car, I know I've started to think about leaving tonight, although nothing seems right in cars." So we have what is perhaps confirmation of the spirit leaving the body, and what may ostensibly be a sense of reluctance, the feeling that something is wrong. And if he has just invited the Antichrist consciousness in, then it's no wonder that he would start to feel this way. At the start of the video, we see Gary walking behind the Pyramid of Illumination. The light emanating from the pyramid is green, the colour of the heart chakra, which is of course the place that an entity resides when given the ivory key. Gary is wearing black before he steps into the pyramid, and he stands under the light. And at that stage he undergoes an alchemical transmutation, or polarity shift, when he transforms on the spot from wearing black to wearing red. I think it's safe to say that the red in this case is symbolic of the Antichrist consciousness entering his body, or in maritime terms, vessel. In other words, the sailor has been given liberty to enter the port, or the portal. Not long after the last verse, Gary walks out of the pyramid towards the camera. Here he turns around and observes the Pyramid of Illumination. A keyboard or a piano is shown, confirming that the Antichrist consciousness has been given the ivory key. There are also white stripes on a black background, denoting duality. Gary is shown, or more accurately, the Antichrist consciousness is shown moving along the ivory keys in a drive-in pose, telling us that it is the driving force of the vessel, that it has the proverbial keys to the car, so to speak. All in all, the themes of this song and video, when placed under scrutiny, are fairly self-explanatory, taking into consideration the electric nature of maritime law and the fact that the jinn are in the Quran said to be made of quote-unquote smokeless fire, which sounds a hell of a lot like plasma. It's no coincidence, not that I believe in such things, that Gary has another song called Our Friends Electric.